Now let's talk about creating our own input fields for our custom editor. Let's open up the Hello World editor inside of MonoDevelop. And we're going to comment out our Draw Default Inspector and the custom label that we created before. We're going to leave script because we're going to want to reference the fields on the actual Hello World class itself. We'll make a little room and let's start with a float. From the Editor GUI Layout class, we'll call the float field. We're going to give it a label of speed, and we're going to access the script's speed public field, just like we did before. Let's save this and go back into Unity. Once it's compiled, let's select our sprite and take a look, and you'll now see that the value of speed is 10. If you remember earlier, we had changed this value when we were going through and playing with the slider. Unity is going to automatically save a serialized copy of the values from this class. So in this case, this value is automatically going to get saved. Let's try to make this value 0. As you can see, whenever you try to change the value, it immediately reverts back to 10. The reason for this is that we're not saving the value back from the editor to the actual instance of the Hello World script. Let's go back and fix this. Each of the Editor GUI layout methods returns a value that you'll get from the inspector itself. In this case, if we were to type in script speed equal to the return value of our float field, we should now be able to save this value. Let's go back into Unity, let it recompile, and change the value to 0. You'll now see that this value has been saved. As you continue to create your own custom input fields, it's very important to save the data back to the class that you're editing. Next, let's take a look at a different type of input to help make speed a little easier to work with. If we go back to where we call our float field, let's replace this with a slider. The slider is going to accept a string as the label, the default value, and then we can give it a minimum and a maximum value to define the slider's range. Let's save our code and go back into Unity. Once it recompiles, you'll see that we now have a slider again. There are a lot of different types of fields that are made available from the Editor GUI Layout class. I highly suggest going to Unity's documentation and looking at all the different options in the Editor GUI layout. Each of these methods will follow a similar structure. You'll define a string as a name, you'll supply it with a default value, and then any other options that are used to configure the type of input itself.